How to win any argument without raising your voice. Introduction. The quiet power most people never learn. Most people think arguments are won by the person who talks the loudest, the person with the strongest voice, the quickest comeback, the sharpest insult, the most aggressive presence. From childhood, we are exposed to this idea. In movies, the dominant character usually overpowers everyone else. In debates, the loudest participant often receives the most attention. In everyday life, many people assume that confidence means speaking over others. But reality tells a different story. The people who consistently influence others, earn respect, and navigate conflict successfully are rarely the loudest people in the room. They are often the calmest. They understand a truth that many never learn. The goal of an argument is not to overpower someone. The goal is to influence them. And influence requires a completely different skill set. Why most arguments fail? Think about the last argument you witnessed. Perhaps it was between friends, family members, co-workers, strangers online. Maybe it was an argument you personally participated in. What happened? Most likely, emotions took over. Voices became louder. People interrupted each other. Defensiveness increased. Listening disappeared. Both sides became focused on proving they were right. And when that happens, something important changes. The conversation stops being about truth. It becomes about ego. The objective shifts from understanding to winning. Ironically, this usually guarantees that nobody wins. The hidden cost of raising your voice. Many people raise their voice because they believe it increases their authority. But psychology suggests the opposite. When someone loses emotional control, observers often notice. Even if the content of their argument is valid, the emotional display changes how the message is perceived. People begin paying attention to the emotion instead of the argument. The discussion becomes about behavior rather than ideas. This is one reason calm communicators are often more persuasive. Their message remains the focus. Their emotions do not distract from their point. The difference between strength and reactivity. One of the greatest misunderstandings about communication is the belief that aggression equals strength. It does not. Aggression often signals a lack of control. True strength is the ability to remain composed when emotions are trying to take control. Imagine two people during a disagreement. The first person becomes angry, interrupts constantly, raises their voice, makes personal attacks. The second person remains calm, listens carefully, responds thoughtfully, maintains composure. Which person appears stronger? Most people instinctively choose the second. Not because they are louder, because they are more controlled. And control creates credibility. Why people become defensive? To understand arguments, we must first understand human psychology. When people feel attacked, criticized, or threatened, they often become defensive. This response is automatic. The brain interprets certain social situations as threats. Once defensiveness appears, rational thinking decreases. People stop evaluating ideas objectively. Instead, they begin protecting themselves. This means that attacking someone directly often makes persuasion harder, not easier. The more threatened someone feels, the more resistant they become. This is why many arguments fail. The strategy itself creates resistance. Influence versus intimidation. There is a significant difference between influence and intimidation. Intimidation relies on fear. Influence relies on trust. Intimidation may create short-term compliance. Influence creates long-term change. A person who intimidates others may force agreement temporarily. But agreement gained through pressure rarely lasts. A person who influences others changes minds. And changed minds create lasting results. Throughout this book, we will focus on influence. Because influence is far more powerful than intimidation. The calm advantage. Calmness provides several advantages during disagreement. First, it improves thinking. When emotions remain manageable, Reasoning remains available. Second, calmness improves listening. You can gather information instead of reacting impulsively. Third, calmness creates contrast. If another person becomes emotional while you remain composed, observers naturally notice the difference. The calmer person often appears more credible. Not because they are automatically correct, because they appear more in control. Why winning is often the wrong goal. Many people approach disagreements with a simple objective: I need to win. This mindset creates problems. Because winning often becomes more important than understanding, more important than truth, more important than resolution. A better question is, what outcome do I want? Sometimes the outcome is solving a problem. Sometimes it is preserving a relationship. Sometimes it is clarifying expectations. Sometimes it is protecting a boundary. The person who focuses only on victory often loses sight of these larger goals. The most influential people stay curious. One trait appears repeatedly among exceptional communicators: curiosity. Instead of assuming they already know everything, they ask questions. They seek understanding. They explore perspectives. This does not mean they abandon their position. It means they remain open to information. Curiosity lowers defensiveness. Curiosity improves communication. Curiosity creates opportunities for influence. And influence is far more effective than force. The myth of instant persuasion. Many people expect arguments to produce immediate results. They present a fact, make a point, deliver a clever response, and expect the other person to instantly change their mind. Human psychology rarely works this way. People often need time, space, reflection. Many minds change long after the conversation ends. This means success is not always visible immediately. The seed may be planted today. The change may happen later. Understanding this prevents frustration. What you will learn. This book is not about manipulating people. It is not about humiliating opponents. It is not about winning through tricks. It is about mastering communication under pressure. You will learn how to stay calm during conflict, how to reduce defensiveness, how to speak with authority, how to ask powerful questions, how to handle difficult personalities, how to persuade without aggression, how to maintain respect during disagreement, how to know when walking away is the smartest move. These skills extend far beyond arguments. They improve relationships, leadership, negotiation, parenting, business, and everyday communication. The quiet power. The most powerful communicator is not necessarily the smartest person, not the loudest, not the most intimidating. The most powerful communicator is often the person who remains calm while others lose control. The person who listens while others react. The person who thinks while others attack. The person who influences while others intimidate. That quiet power is available to anyone willing to develop it. And it begins with a simple realization: you do not need to raise your voice to raise your influence. In the next chapter, we will explore why loud people often lose arguments, and why calmness is one of the strongest advantages you can possess in any disagreement. Chapter 1. Why loud people often lose arguments. Walk into almost any heated argument and you will notice something predictable. As emotions rise, voices rise. As frustration increases, volume increases. As patience disappears, shouting begins. Many people believe this is a sign of strength. They assume the louder person is taking control, dominating the conversation, winning the argument. But appearances can be deceiving. In reality, raising your voice often signals the exact opposite of what people intend. Instead of demonstrating power, it frequently reveals a loss of control. And in any argument, control is one of your greatest assets. The myth that volume equals authority. From an early age, many people learn an unfortunate lesson: loudness gets attention. The child who shouts is noticed. The person who interrupts dominates the discussion. The aggressive speaker controls the room. Because loudness attracts attention, people often confuse attention with authority. but they are not the same thing. Attention simply means people are noticing you. Authority means people trust your judgment. One can be achieved through noise. The other must be earned. Many loud people receive attention. Few receive genuine respect. The difference between being heard and being believed. Imagine two speakers. The first person speaks loudly, interrupts constantly, and reacts emotionally. The second person speaks calmly, carefully, and confidently. Who attracts more attention? Probably the first. Who appears more credible? Usually the second. This distinction matters. Because winning an argument is not about being heard. It is about being believed. People may hear shouting, but they rarely find it persuasive. Influence depends on credibility, and credibility grows when emotions remain under control. What happens inside the brain during conflict? To understand why loudness often fails, we need to understand what happens psychologically during conflict. When people feel threatened, challenged, or attacked, the brain activates protective mechanisms. Heart rate increases. Stress hormones rise. Attention narrows. Emotional reactivity grows. In this state, rational thinking becomes more difficult. The brain shifts from analysis to defense. Now imagine adding shouting to the situation. The perceived threat becomes even stronger. The other person's brain becomes even more defensive. And defensive people are difficult to persuade. This is one reason loud arguments rarely change minds. They activate resistance instead of reflection. Why shouting creates opposition? Human beings value autonomy. People want to feel that they are making their own choices. When someone shouts, pressures, or intimidates, autonomy feels threatened. The natural response is resistance. Even when the loud person has a valid point, the delivery can create opposition. People begin defending themselves rather than considering the argument. The discussion becomes a contest of wills. And once that happens, persuasion becomes unlikely. The confidence illusion. Many people mistake aggression for confidence. At first glance, they seem similar. Both can appear forceful. Both can appear assertive. Both can command attention. But underneath, they are very different. Aggression often comes from emotional reactivity. Confidence comes from emotional stability. An aggressive person needs to overpower. A confident person does not. An aggressive person seeks control over others. A confident person maintains control over themselves. This difference becomes obvious under pressure. Because true confidence remains calm. Why calm people appear stronger? Imagine a disagreement between two individuals. One becomes increasingly angry. Their voice rises. Their gestures become dramatic. Their frustration becomes obvious. The other remains composed. They listen. Respond thoughtfully. Maintain steady eye contact. Speak clearly. Most observers instinctively trust the calmer individual more. Not because calmness guarantees correctness. Because calmness signals competence. It suggests emotional regulation, self-control, confidence. And these qualities inspire trust. The role of emotional contagion. Emotions are contagious. People unconsciously absorb the emotional states of those around them. If someone enters a room anxious, tension spreads. If someone enters angry, irritation spreads. If someone enters calm, calmness often spreads as well. This principle becomes extremely important during arguments. The emotional state you bring into the conversation influences the entire interaction. A calm person can reduce tension. An angry person often amplifies it. This means emotional control is not just personal. It affects everyone involved. Why loudness weakens your message? When emotions become highly visible, they often overshadow the actual argument. Instead of evaluating your reasoning, people focus on your behavior. They think, why are they so upset? Why are they yelling? Why are they losing control? The content of your message receives less attention. The emotional display becomes the story. This is one of the hidden costs of shouting. It distracts from your strongest points. The calm advantage in professional settings. Consider the workplace. Imagine two managers facing the same problem. One responds with anger, raises their voice, publicly criticizes employees. The other remains composed, addresses the issue directly, communicates expectations clearly. Which manager inspires greater confidence? Which leader would you trust more? The answer is usually obvious. Because leadership is closely connected to emotional regulation, people trust those who remain steady under pressure, not those who become unpredictable. Why losing control feels powerful if shouting is so ineffective? Why do people continue doing it? Because it creates a temporary sense of power. When emotions are intense, expressing them provides relief. The release feels satisfying. For a moment, it feels like progress. But emotional relief and effective persuasion are not the same thing. Something can feel powerful while actually reducing influence. This is one of the great traps of conflict. Reacting feels productive. Responding is productive. The power of strategic silence. One of the most underrated skills in communication is silence. Most people feel uncomfortable with it. They rush to fill pauses, defend themselves, explain, argue, react. But silence has power. A thoughtful pause communicates confidence. It demonstrates control. It gives you time to think. And it often encourages the other person to reveal more information. People who are comfortable with silence possess an advantage many never develop. How calmness changes the dynamic. When one person remains calm during conflict, something interesting happens. The emotional pattern breaks. The expected escalation does not occur. The argument loses momentum. The other person often becomes less aggressive over time. Not always, but often. Calmness changes the environment. It creates space for reasoning. And reasoning is where influence lies. Respect is earned through stability. People often admire those who remain composed during difficult situations. Why? Because emotional stability is rare. Anyone can remain calm when life is easy. The true test comes during disagreement. Pressure reveals character. And character creates respect. The person who maintains composure when challenged demonstrates a level of self-mastery that others naturally admire. The quiet confidence principle. Quiet confidence is one of the most persuasive qualities a person can possess. It does not need attention. It does not seek validation. It does not rely on volume. It simply exists. A quietly confident person understands that truth does not become stronger when shouted. Facts do not become more convincing because they are delivered aggressively. A strong argument can stand on its own. Without theatrics. Without intimidation. Without noise. What truly wins arguments? At the end of the day, arguments are rarely won through force. They are won through clarity, credibility, composure, understanding, influence. The loudest voice may dominate the moment, but the calmest voice often shapes the outcome. Because people remember how you made them feel, and they trust those who remain steady when everyone else becomes reactive. Perhaps the most important truth of all is this: loudness attracts attention. Calmness earns trust. Attention is temporary. Trust is influential. Anyone can raise their voice. Few people can master their emotions. And the person who masters their emotions possesses a powerful advantage in every disagreement they face. In the next chapter, we will explore the foundation of every successful argument: mastering your own emotions before attempting to influence anyone else's. Chapter 2. Control yourself before you control the conversation. Every argument begins in one of two places. It begins with the other person, or it begins with you. Most people spend their time focusing on the other person. How to respond, how to persuade, how to defend themselves, how to win. But the most skilled communicators understand something different. Before you can influence another mind, you must first manage your own. This is the hidden foundation of every successful argument. Not intelligence. Not charisma. Not quick comebacks. Self-control. Because when emotions take control of you, influence disappears. And when influence disappears, the conversation becomes a battle instead of a discussion. The real opponent. When people think about arguments, they usually imagine the person standing in front of them. The coworker. The spouse. The friend. The stranger online. The difficult customer. But in reality, the biggest opponent is often not the other person. It is your own emotional reaction. Your anger. Your frustration. Your pride. Your fear. Your need to be right. These emotions can sabotage even the strongest argument. Because the moment they take over, your judgment becomes clouded. Why emotions hijack conversations? Have you ever said something during an argument that you later regretted? Most people have. In the heat of the moment, emotions create urgency. You feel compelled to respond immediately. To defend yourself. To attack back. To prove your point. The problem is that strong emotions narrow your perspective. Instead of seeing the full situation, you focus on the threat. The conversation becomes less about solving a problem and more about protecting your ego. And that shift changes everything. The emotional trap. Many arguments follow the same predictable pattern. One person says something irritating. The other reacts emotionally. The first person reacts to that reaction. And within minutes, both people are arguing about emotions instead of the original issue. This is the emotional trap. The original topic gets buried beneath frustration. The discussion becomes personal. Once that happens, resolution becomes much harder. Emotion creates heat. But heat rarely creates clarity. The difference between reacting and responding. One of the most important communication skills you can develop is learning the difference between reacting and responding. A reaction is automatic, immediate, emotional, unfiltered. A response is intentional, thoughtful, measured, controlled. Most people react. Highly effective communicators respond. The difference may only be a few seconds. But those few seconds can completely change the outcome of a conversation. Why pausing is powerful when emotions rise. Many people speed up. They talk faster, think faster, react faster. But speed is often the enemy of wisdom. A simple pause can be transformative. A few seconds of silence creates space. Space to think. Space to breathe. Space to choose your words carefully. The pause prevents emotions from making decisions for you. And every powerful communicator knows how to use it. The need to be right. One of the biggest obstacles to productive arguments is the need to be right. At first, this seems harmless. After all, if you believe you are correct, why wouldn't you want to prove it? The problem is that the desire to be right often becomes stronger than the desire to understand. When this happens, curiosity disappears. Listening disappears. Learning disappears. The conversation becomes a competition. And competitions create winners and losers. But meaningful discussions create understanding. Emotional control is not emotional suppression. Many people misunderstand emotional regulation. They think it means ignoring feelings, pretending not to care, acting emotionless. That is not emotional control. Emotional control means recognizing emotions without allowing them to dictate behavior. You can feel angry without shouting. Feel frustrated without insulting. Feel hurt without becoming defensive. The emotion exists. But it does not become the driver. You remain in control. Why calmness is contagious. Human beings unconsciously mirror each other. If someone smiles, we often smile back. If someone laughs, we feel more likely to laugh. If someone becomes angry, we feel tension rise. The same principle applies to calmness. When you remain composed, you often reduce the emotional intensity of the interaction. Not always, but often enough that it becomes a powerful tool. Your emotional state influences the environment around you. This means your calmness can become a strategic advantage. The ego problem. Many arguments are not really about facts. They are about identity. People become attached to beliefs. Opinions become part of self-image. Disagreement begins to feel personal. When this happens, ego enters the conversation. And ego is rarely helpful. The ego wants validation, recognition, victory. The ego fears being wrong, being embarrassed, being challenged. The more ego dominates the discussion, the harder productive communication becomes. Learning to detach. One of the most powerful habits you can develop is emotional detachment. This does not mean indifference. It means creating distance between your identity and your opinions. You can hold a belief strongly while remaining open to new information. You can disagree without feeling threatened. You can be challenged without becoming defensive. This flexibility creates strength. Because your confidence no longer depends on always being correct. The strength of self-awareness. Before you can manage your emotions, you must recognize them. This sounds obvious. Yet many people move through arguments without understanding what they are feeling. They think they are angry. But underneath, they are hurt. They think they are frustrated. But underneath, they feel disrespected. They think they are defending a principle. But underneath, they fear looking foolish. Self-awareness helps identify the true emotion beneath the reaction. And once you understand the emotion, it becomes easier to manage. Questions to ask yourself. During difficult conversations, pause and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Why am I feeling it? What outcome do I actually want? Will my next response move me closer to that outcome? These questions create awareness. And awareness creates choice. Without awareness, reactions become automatic. With awareness, responses become intentional. Why emotional discipline creates influence. People are naturally drawn to those who remain composed under pressure. It signals maturity, confidence, reliability. When others know you can handle disagreement without losing control, they take your words more seriously. This is influence. Not force. Not intimidation. Influence. The ability to affect others because they trust your judgment. And trust grows when people see emotional discipline. The long-term advantage. Most people focus on winning the current argument. Emotionally intelligent people focus on the long-term relationship. The reputation they build. The trust they create. The respect they earn. They understand that every conversation contributes to a larger picture. Every reaction shapes how others perceive them. Every moment of self-control strengthens credibility. Over time, this advantage compounds. The quiet discipline. The ability to remain calm during conflict is not a personality trait. It is a skill. And like any skill, it improves with practice. Each disagreement becomes an opportunity. An opportunity to practice patience, restraint, awareness, composure. The goal is not perfection. The goal is progress. Every moment you choose a response over a reaction, you become stronger. Master yourself first. Many people spend years trying to master persuasion techniques, debate strategies, communication tactics. Yet they overlook the most important skill of all. Self-mastery. Because the greatest argument you will ever win is the argument between your emotions and your judgment. When judgment wins, influence becomes possible. When emotions take over, influence disappears. Perhaps the most important truth of all is this: the person who controls the conversation is usually the person who controls themselves. Not the loudest person. Not the smartest person. Not the most aggressive person. The most disciplined person. Because every successful argument begins long before the first words are spoken. It begins with mastering your own emotions. In the next chapter, we will explore one of the most underrated persuasion skills in existence: listening like a strategist instead of listening like a competitor. Chapter 3. Listen like a strategist. Most people believe that winning an argument depends on what you say. The clever point. The perfect comeback. The devastating piece of evidence. The unforgettable quote. But the greatest communicators understand something that most people overlook. The quality of your argument depends heavily on how well you listen. This sounds simple. Almost too simple. Yet it is one of the rarest skills in modern communication. Most people do not listen to understand. They listen to reply. They listen to defend. They listen to interrupt. They listen to prepare their next point. As a result, they miss valuable information. And information is one of the most powerful advantages you can possess in any disagreement. Why most people never truly listen. Imagine two people having an argument. One person speaks. The other appears to be listening. But inside their mind, something else is happening. They are preparing a response. Searching for flaws. Building a counter-argument. Waiting for their turn. The conversation becomes two monologues rather than one dialogue. Neither person feels heard. Neither person feels understood. And both become increasingly frustrated. This pattern destroys communication. Because understanding requires attention. And attention cannot exist when your mind is focused entirely on yourself. The strategic advantage of listening. Listening provides information. Information provides leverage. When you truly listen, you discover what the other person values, what they fear, what motivates them, what assumptions they are making, what emotional needs are driving their position. This information is invaluable. Because people are rarely persuaded by arguments that ignore their concerns. The more you understand someone, the more effectively you can communicate with them. Why people need to feel heard. One of the strongest psychological needs humans possess is the desire to feel understood. People want acknowledgement, recognition, validation of their experience. This does not mean agreement. It means understanding. Many arguments escalate because one or both people feel ignored. They repeat themselves. Speak louder. Become frustrated. Not because they want victory. Because they want recognition. The moment someone feels genuinely heard, defensiveness often decreases. And when defensiveness decreases, influence increases. Understanding versus agreement. Many people fear listening because they think it means surrendering. They assume, if I listen carefully, I'm admitting they're right. This is not true. Understanding and agreement are completely different. You can fully understand someone's perspective while completely disagreeing with it. In fact, strong disagreement requires strong understanding. Otherwise, you may be arguing against a position they never actually held. The power of reflective listening. One of the simplest yet most powerful communication techniques is reflective listening. Instead of immediately responding, you summarize what the other person said. For example, if I understand correctly, you're concerned that this decision will create more problems later. This technique does several things. First, it shows respect. Second, it reduces misunderstanding. Third, it makes the other person feel heard. And fourth, it often reveals hidden details they would not have shared otherwise. People become surprisingly cooperative when they feel understood. Why interrupting is so damaging. Interrupting feels powerful in the moment. But it often creates the opposite effect. When you interrupt someone, you send a message. What I have to say matters more than what you have to say. Even if that is not your intention, it is often how the behavior is perceived. The result is resistance, frustration, defensiveness, and reduced trust. Strategic communicators resist the urge to interrupt. They allow people to finish. Not because they are passive, because patience gathers information. Listening for emotions, not just words. Words tell part of the story. Emotions tell the rest. Imagine someone says, I don't think this plan will work. On the surface, it sounds like a disagreement about strategy. But beneath the words may be fear, uncertainty, past disappointment, lack of trust. The words reveal the position. The emotions reveal the reason. And if you address only the position, you may miss the real issue. The hidden question behind every argument. Many arguments appear to be about facts. But underneath, another question often exists. Questions such as, do you respect me? Do you value my opinion? Do you understand my concerns? Can I trust you? These emotional questions frequently drive conflict more than the actual topic itself. The person who recognizes these hidden questions gains a tremendous advantage, because they address the real issue rather than the surface issue. Curiosity is a communication tool. Curiosity changes the entire dynamic of a disagreement. Instead of trying to defeat the other person, you try to understand them. You ask, why do you think that? What led you to that conclusion? What concerns you most about this situation? These questions accomplish something remarkable. They lower resistance. People expect attacks. They do not expect genuine curiosity. Curiosity creates openness. And openness creates opportunities for influence. Why people reveal more than they realize. When people feel safe, they talk. When they feel understood, they talk even more. This means that listening often reveals information the other person never intended to share. Not secrets. Insights. Values. Motivations. Concerns. Priorities. The more information you gather, the better equipped you become to respond effectively. This is why great negotiators spend so much time listening. They understand that information is power. The confidence to listen. Ironically, listening requires confidence. Insecure people often feel compelled to speak constantly, to prove themselves, to defend themselves, to demonstrate intelligence. Confident people are comfortable listening. They do not fear silence. They do not fear being overlooked. They know that understanding first often leads to stronger communication later. Avoiding the assumption trap. One of the most common mistakes in arguments is assuming you already know what the other person means. This leads to misunderstandings. You respond to an interpretation rather than the actual statement. You attack a position they never intended to communicate. Listening prevents this. It replaces assumptions with clarity. And clarity prevents unnecessary conflict. Why feeling heard changes minds. Research consistently shows that people become more open-minded when they feel understood. This may seem counterintuitive. Many assume persuasion comes from stronger arguments. But often, persuasion begins with emotional safety. When people feel respected, they lower their defenses. When defenses lower, ideas can enter. This is one reason listening is such a powerful influence tool. It creates the conditions necessary for change. The listening advantage. Imagine two debaters. One spends the entire conversation talking. The other spends much of the conversation listening. At first glance, the first person appears more active, more dominant, more engaged. But the second person possesses something far more valuable: information, understanding, context, perspective. These resources create stronger arguments. And stronger arguments create greater influence. Listen to learn, not to win. The moment you enter a conversation determined only to win, your listening suffers. Your attention narrows. Your curiosity disappears. Your ego takes control. But when you enter with a desire to learn, something changes. You become more observant, more patient, more insightful. Ironically, this mindset often makes you far more persuasive, because people trust those who genuinely seek understanding. The quiet weapon. Listening is often underestimated because it looks passive. It appears inactive, invisible, subtle. But appearances are misleading. Listening is not passive. It is strategic. It gathers information, builds trust, reduces resistance, improves understanding, and creates opportunities for influence. In many arguments, the person who listens best ultimately communicates best. And the person who communicates best often achieves the best outcome. Perhaps the most important truth of all is this: most people enter arguments focused on speaking. The most influential people enter focused on understanding. Because understanding creates connection. Connection creates trust. Trust creates influence. And influence, not volume, is what changes minds. The person who listens like a strategist gains an advantage that loud voices can never match. In the next chapter, we will explore one of the most powerful persuasion techniques ever developed: asking questions instead of launching attacks. Chapter 4. Ask questions instead of making attacks. Most people enter an argument armed with statements. They prepare facts, opinions, counter-arguments, evidence, rebuttals. They believe persuasion comes from telling people why they are wrong, telling people why they should change, telling people why their position makes no sense. But there is a problem. People rarely enjoy being told they are wrong. In fact, few things create resistance faster. The moment someone feels attacked, their defenses rise. Their mind closes. Their focus shifts from learning to protecting themselves. This is why many arguments fail before they truly begin. The strategy itself creates opposition. The most persuasive communicators understand a different principle: questions are often more powerful than statements. Because questions invite thinking, statements often invite resistance. Why attacks trigger defensiveness? Imagine someone says, "You're completely wrong." What happens inside your mind? Most likely, you do not become more open-minded. You become defensive. You begin preparing a response, searching for evidence, protecting your position. This reaction is natural. Human beings are wired to defend beliefs that feel connected to their identity. Direct attacks activate this defense mechanism. The more aggressive the attack, the stronger the resistance. And resistance is the enemy of persuasion. The difference between resistance and reflection: persuasion requires reflection. Reflection requires openness. Openness disappears when people feel threatened. Questions help avoid this problem. Instead of forcing a conclusion, they encourage exploration. Instead of creating opposition, they create curiosity. Instead of demanding change, they invite consideration. This small shift can completely transform a conversation. The Socratic secret. More than 2,000 years ago, the Greek philosopher developed a method that remains remarkably effective today. Rather than telling people what to think, he asked questions. Lots of questions. Questions designed to reveal assumptions. Questions designed to encourage critical thinking. Questions designed to expose contradictions. Instead of attacking ideas directly, he allowed people to examine their own reasoning. This approach became known as the Socratic method. And it remains one of the most powerful persuasion techniques ever developed. Why people trust their own conclusions more? There is a simple psychological principle that explains why questions work. People trust conclusions they reach themselves more than conclusions imposed by others. If someone tells you what to think, skepticism often appears. But if you discover an idea through your own reasoning, acceptance becomes easier. Questions guide people toward insight. Statements often push them away from it. This is why great teachers ask questions. Great leaders ask questions. Great negotiators ask questions. They understand that self-discovery is more powerful than instruction. Turning arguments into conversations. Most arguments feel like battles. Each side is trying to defeat the other. Questions change the atmosphere. Instead of a battle, the discussion becomes an exploration. For example, compare these two responses. Attack: "That doesn't make any sense." Question: "Can you help me understand how you reached that conclusion?" Both responses challenge the idea. But the second response does so without creating immediate hostility. One attacks. The other investigates. The difference is enormous. The power of clarifying questions. Many disagreements exist because people misunderstand each other. Before arguing, seek clarity. Ask, "What exactly do you mean by that? Can you explain your reasoning? How are you defining that term?" These questions reveal information. Often, they expose misunderstandings before they become larger conflicts. Sometimes you discover that you agree more than you originally thought. Sometimes you discover the disagreement is different from what you assumed. Either way, clarity improves communication. Questions reveal assumptions. Every belief rests on assumptions. Some assumptions are accurate, others are flawed. The challenge is that people rarely examine them. Questions help bring assumptions into the open. For example, what evidence led you to that belief? What would change your mind? Have you considered any alternative explanations? These questions encourage deeper thinking. They invite analysis rather than defense. And analysis often produces better conversations. The gentle challenge. One of the greatest strengths of questions is their ability to challenge without attacking. Imagine someone makes a claim that seems questionable. You could respond, "That's ridiculous." Or you could ask, "What evidence supports that conclusion?" The second response still challenges the claim, but it does so respectfully. The burden shifts to reasoning rather than emotion. This keeps the conversation productive. Why curiosity is disarming. People expect opposition. They expect criticism. They expect disagreement. They rarely expect genuine curiosity. When you ask thoughtful questions, something interesting happens. The emotional temperature drops. The conversation slows down. People begin explaining rather than defending. This creates opportunities for understanding. And understanding creates opportunities for influence. The question that changes everything. One particularly powerful question is, "What makes you feel that way?" Notice the wording. Not, "Why are you wrong?" Not, "How can you believe that?" Instead, "What makes you feel that way?" This question invites explanation. It reveals motivations, experiences, emotions, and often, the real reasons behind someone's position. Those reasons are frequently more important than the argument itself. How questions expose weak arguments. Poor arguments often collapse under examination. But there is a right way and a wrong way to reveal weaknesses. The wrong way is aggressive confrontation. The right way is thoughtful questioning. For example, "How does that explain this situation? What happens if we apply that principle consistently? How would you address this contradiction?" These questions encourage self-reflection. People become aware of weaknesses themselves. And self-awareness is far more persuasive than external criticism. The importance of tone. Questions are powerful. But tone matters. A sincere question encourages dialogue. A sarcastic question encourages conflict. Consider the difference. "Can you explain that?" versus, "Can you explain that?" The words are identical. The tone changes everything. Persuasion requires genuine curiosity, not disguised hostility. Asking questions under pressure. The ability to ask good questions becomes especially valuable during emotional conversations. When tension rises, questions slow the interaction down. They create space. Space to think, space to listen, space to understand. Instead of reacting emotionally, you guide the conversation toward reflection. This is one of the most effective ways to maintain control without becoming controlling. Questions build respect. People appreciate being heard. They appreciate having an opportunity to explain themselves. Even when disagreement remains, thoughtful questions communicate respect. Respect reduces defensiveness. Respect increases trust. And trust makes influence possible. This is why the strongest communicators rarely rush to attack. They seek understanding first. The strategic advantage. Questions accomplish several goals simultaneously. They gather information. They reveal assumptions. They lower resistance. They encourage reflection. They create understanding. They expose weaknesses naturally. Few communication tools offer so many benefits. This is why questions are often more persuasive than arguments themselves. Leading without forcing. The ultimate goal is not control. It is guidance. Questions allow you to lead people toward insight without forcing them. Instead of pushing, you invite. Instead of attacking, you explore. Instead of demanding change, you encourage discovery. This approach is more respectful, more effective, and far more sustainable. Perhaps the most important truth of all is this: statements tell people what to think. Questions encourage people to think. And people are far more likely to trust conclusions they reach themselves. The most persuasive communicators do not rely solely on arguments. They rely on curiosity. They ask thoughtful questions. They invite reflection. And through reflection, they create influence. Because the right question can accomplish what 100 attacks never will. In the next chapter, we will explore the psychology of persuasion itself, why facts alone rarely change minds, and what truly influences human decision-making. Chapter 5. The psychology of persuasion. Most people believe persuasion is simple. If you have the facts, you should win the argument. If your evidence is stronger, people should change their minds. If your logic is sound, others should agree. It sounds reasonable. It sounds logical. And it is completely wrong. Every day, intelligent people ignore facts, reject evidence, defend weak arguments, hold on to beliefs that clearly conflict with reality. Why? Because human beings are not purely logical creatures. We like to think we are. But psychology tells a different story. People make decisions emotionally first and rationally second. Logic matters. Facts matter. Evidence matters. But they are only part of the equation. To understand persuasion, you must first understand human nature. The illusion of rationality. Most people see themselves as rational thinkers. They believe they evaluate information objectively, consider evidence fairly, reach conclusions logically. But the human mind does not work like a computer. It filters information, interprets information, distorts information, protects existing beliefs. Psychologists have identified dozens of mental shortcuts and biases that influence judgment. These shortcuts help us navigate the world quickly. But they also make persuasion far more complicated than simply presenting facts. Why facts alone rarely change minds. Imagine someone has believed something for years. They have defended it, shared it, built part of their identity around it. Now imagine you present evidence that contradicts that belief. What happens? Many people assume the person will change their mind. But often the opposite occurs. The person becomes even more committed to their position. This phenomenon surprises many people. Yet it is common. Because beliefs are not merely ideas. They are often tied to identity. And when identity feels threatened, resistance appears. The power of emotional investment. People become emotionally attached to beliefs, political opinions, religious views, parenting styles, career choices, lifestyle decisions. These beliefs often represent more than facts. They represent personal history, values, experiences, communities, relationships. When you challenge a deeply held belief, the person may feel as though you are challenging them. This emotional investment changes the conversation. It becomes personal. And personal issues are rarely resolved through logic alone. The need for consistency. Human beings have a strong desire to appear consistent. We want our actions, beliefs, and identity to align. Changing our minds can feel uncomfortable, sometimes even embarrassing. Admitting we were wrong may threaten our self-image. As a result, many people resist information that creates inconsistency. Not because the information is false. Because accepting it creates psychological discomfort. Understanding this helps explain why persuasion requires patience. Confirmation bias. One of the most powerful psychological forces in human behavior is confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the tendency to seek information that supports existing beliefs while ignoring information that challenges them. Imagine someone believes a particular idea. They naturally pay attention to evidence that confirms it. At the same time, they dismiss contradictory evidence, often without realizing it. This happens to everyone, even highly intelligent people, even experts, even you. Recognizing this tendency is essential because it reminds us that persuasion is not simply a battle of facts. It is a battle against deeply rooted mental habits. Why trust matters more than logic. Imagine receiving advice from someone you trust deeply. Now imagine receiving the same advice from someone you dislike. The message is identical, yet your reaction changes. Why? Because trust influences perception. People are more receptive to information from sources they respect, less receptive to information from sources they distrust. This means that building trust is often more important than presenting evidence. Without trust, even strong arguments struggle. With trust, difficult conversations become possible. The emotional gateway. Before ideas reach the mind, they often pass through emotions. If someone feels attacked, defensive, or disrespected, their emotional state blocks influence. The information may be accurate, but it never receives a fair hearing. On the other hand, when someone feels respected and understood, openness increases. This is why skilled communicators pay attention to emotions. Not because emotions replace facts. Because emotions determine whether facts will be considered at all. The principle of reciprocity. Human beings have a natural tendency to reciprocate. When someone listens to us, we feel more willing to listen to them. When someone treats us respectfully, we feel more inclined to return that respect. This principle is powerful during disagreements. If you want openness, demonstrate openness. If you want understanding, offer understanding. If you want respect, show respect. People often mirror the behavior they receive. This creates opportunities for persuasion. Stories are more persuasive than statistics. Facts inform. Stories move. This is why stories are so powerful. They engage emotions, create imagery, build connection, help people remember. Imagine hearing a statistic about a problem. Now imagine hearing the personal story of someone affected by that problem. Which one stays with you longer? Usually the story. Because stories activate both emotion and imagination. And persuasion often happens when emotion and logic work together. The danger of humiliation. One of the fastest ways to lose influence is to embarrass someone publicly. Humiliation creates resistance, resentment, defensiveness. Even if you win the argument, you may lose the person. Many people care more about preserving dignity than admitting error. Understanding this changes how you communicate. Instead of trying to defeat people, you help them preserve self-respect. This makes change easier. Because nobody likes feeling humiliated. Persuasion versus manipulation. At this point, it is important to make a distinction. Persuasion and manipulation are not the same thing. Manipulation seeks control for personal benefit. Persuasion seeks understanding and influence through honest communication. Manipulation hides intentions. Persuasion is transparent. Manipulation exploits. Persuasion respects. The goal of this book is not to teach manipulation. It is to teach ethical influence. Influence built on trust, respect, and understanding. The principle of small agreements. People rarely move from one extreme position to another instantly. Change usually happens gradually. This is why small agreements matter. Instead of trying to change someone's entire perspective, look for common ground. Find areas of agreement, shared values, mutual concerns. These points create momentum, and momentum makes larger discussions easier. Persuasion is often a series of small steps rather than one dramatic breakthrough. Why timing matters. Even the best argument can fail if delivered at the wrong time. People are less receptive when They are angry. They are stressed. They feel threatened. They feel embarrassed. They feel exhausted. Timing affects openness. This is why emotionally intelligent communicators pay attention to context. Sometimes the smartest move is waiting. Patience can be more persuasive than pressure. The most persuasive question, one of the most effective questions you can ask is, what would convince you to change your mind? This question does several things. It reveals openness, clarifies standards of evidence, identifies potential barriers, and sometimes exposes a surprising truth. Some people are not actually open to changing their minds. Knowing this helps you decide whether further discussion is worthwhile. The influence formula. Persuasion is not about overpowering people. It is about creating conditions where change becomes possible. Those conditions include trust, respect, understanding, emotional safety, curiosity, credibility. When these elements are present, influence increases. When they are absent, resistance increases. This is the psychology behind persuasion. Not force. Not intimidation. Not dominance. Connection. Changing minds begins with understanding minds. The greatest communicators understand that persuasion is not about winning arguments. It is about understanding people. Because people are not robots. They are emotional beings, social beings, psychological beings. And effective influence requires recognizing all three. The better you understand human nature, the more effective your communication becomes. Perhaps the most important truth of all is this: facts matter. Logic matters. Evidence matters. But people rarely change because of facts alone. They change when trust exists, when respect exists, when understanding exists. The most persuasive communicators understand human psychology before they attempt to change human opinions. Because persuasion begins with people, not arguments. In the next chapter, we will explore how to remain calm when someone deliberately tries to provoke you, insult you, or pull you into an emotional battle. Chapter 6. How to stay calm when someone tries to provoke you. One of the greatest tests of communication does not happen when people are reasonable. It happens when they are not. Anyone can remain calm when a conversation is respectful. Anyone can stay composed when everyone agrees. Anyone can speak thoughtfully when emotions are low. The real challenge begins when someone tries to provoke you. When they insult you, mock you, interrupt you, misrepresent your words, question your intelligence, attack your character, or deliberately push your emotional buttons. These moments reveal something important. Not who the other person is, but who you are. Because in every difficult conversation, there is a choice. You can react, or you can respond. And that choice determines who controls the interaction. Why provocation works. To defeat provocation, you must first understand it. Most people assume provocations are about communication. They are not. They are about emotion. The goal of provocation is rarely to improve understanding. The goal is to create a reaction. A reaction changes the dynamic. It shifts attention. It weakens judgment. It increases emotional intensity. And most importantly, it gives control to the person doing the provoking. The moment they control your emotions, they begin controlling the conversation. The hidden goal of emotional traps. Many provocations are designed to achieve one thing: to pull you into an emotional state where you stop thinking clearly. Imagine someone insults you. Your heart rate rises. Your frustration increases. Your focus narrows. Now you are no longer evaluating the conversation objectively. You are defending yourself. This is exactly what many provocateurs want. Because emotional people are easier to manipulate than calm people. The first rule: don't take the bait. Imagine a fisherman. The fish sees the bait. It reacts impulsively, and suddenly it is hooked. Provocation works the same way. Someone offers emotional bait, an insult, a criticism, a sarcastic remark, a personal attack. Your reaction determines whether the bait works. The strongest response is often refusing to bite. Not because you are weak. Because you understand the game being played. And you refuse to participate. Why emotional control is a superpower. Most people believe strength means dominating others. True strength means mastering yourself. Anyone can lose control. Anyone can react impulsively. Anyone can lash out. Self-control is far rarer. When someone attempts to provoke you and fails, something interesting happens. The power dynamic shifts. The person expected emotional chaos. Instead, they encounter composure. That composure becomes a form of strength. Understanding your triggers. Every person has emotional triggers. Certain comments. Certain topics. Certain behaviors. Certain insecurities. When these triggers are activated, strong emotions appear. The problem is not having triggers. Everyone has them. The problem is being unaware of them. Awareness changes everything. Because once you know your triggers, you can prepare for them. And preparation creates control. The pause that changes everything. One of the simplest ways to avoid emotional reactions is to pause. Just pause. A few seconds. Nothing dramatic. Nothing complicated. The pause interrupts automatic behavior. It creates space between stimulus and response. Within that space lies your power. Because reactions are automatic, responses are chosen. And every pause gives you another opportunity to choose. Why silence makes people uncomfortable. Many people expect immediate reactions. They insult you and wait. Criticize you and wait. Challenge you and wait. They expect a quick emotional response. Silence disrupts that expectation. A calm pause often feels more powerful than an angry comeback. Because silence communicates something important. I am not emotionally controlled by what you just said. That message carries weight. Especially in tense situations. The psychology of personal attacks. When people struggle to defeat an argument, they sometimes attack the person instead. Instead of discussing ideas, they focus on character, appearance, motives, past mistakes. This strategy often reveals weakness rather than strength, because it shifts attention away from the issue. Recognizing this helps you avoid becoming distracted. The goal is not to defend every insult. The goal is to stay focused on what matters. Separate the message from the delivery. Sometimes people communicate poorly. Very poorly. They may be rude, aggressive, disrespectful. But occasionally, hidden beneath the poor delivery is useful information. Emotionally intelligent communicators separate the message from the delivery. They ask, is there anything useful in what this person is saying? This question protects you from becoming blinded by emotion. Even unpleasant people can occasionally provide valuable insights. Why you don't need to defend everything. One of the biggest mistakes people make is feeling obligated to respond to every criticism, every accusation, every insult, every misunderstanding. But not every attack deserves a response. In fact, many attacks gain power only when you engage with them. Imagine someone throws mud. If you pick it up and throw it back, both people become dirty. Sometimes the wisest response is simply moving forward. Not every criticism deserves your energy. Calmness creates contrast. Imagine two people arguing. One becomes increasingly emotional. The other remains composed. As the contrast grows, observers naturally notice it. The calm person appears more credible, more confident, more trustworthy. This happens because emotional control is visible. People respect those who maintain composure under pressure. Not because calm people are always correct. Because composure suggests maturity. The difference between confidence and defensiveness. Defensive people feel compelled to explain everything, justify everything, correct everything. Confident people are different. They understand that not every misunderstanding must be fixed immediately. Not every accusation must be answered. Not every opinion must be challenged. Confidence creates patience. Defensiveness creates urgency. The more secure you become, the less reactive you become. The strategic use of questions. When someone becomes aggressive, questions can redirect the conversation. Instead of reacting emotionally, ask, "What specifically concerns you? Can you clarify what you mean? What outcome are you hoping for?" Questions slow things down. They encourage thinking. They shift the focus away from emotion and toward understanding. And understanding often reduces conflict. Recognizing manipulation. Some people intentionally create emotional reactions. They know that angry people make mistakes. So they provoke, tease, mock, interrupt, exaggerate, misrepresent. The goal is not discussion. The goal is emotional control. Recognizing this pattern is powerful. Because once you see it, you stop taking the bait. You understand that the reaction itself is the objective, and you refuse to provide it. The freedom of emotional independence. One of the highest forms of confidence is emotional independence. It means your emotional state is not entirely determined by other people's behavior. Someone can disagree without ruining your day. Someone can criticize without destroying your confidence. Someone can insult without controlling your emotions. This freedom is powerful because it places responsibility for your emotional state back where it belongs, with you. When walking away is strength, many people believe walking away means losing. Not always. Sometimes walking away is the strongest move available. If the conversation is no longer productive, if the other person is committed to hostility, if emotions have completely replaced reason, continuing may accomplish nothing. Strength is not staying in every battle. Strength is knowing which battles deserve your energy. The calm person controls the frame. Every conversation has a frame, a tone, an emotional atmosphere. Most people allow others to define it. Emotionally intelligent communicators do the opposite. They maintain their own frame. They remain calm when others become emotional, respectful when others become rude, focused when others become distracted. By doing so, they influence the entire interaction, without force, without aggression, without raising their voice. The unshakable advantage. The ability to remain calm during provocation creates an enormous advantage. It protects judgment, improves credibility, reduces mistakes, and preserves influence. While others react emotionally, you remain focused. While others lose control, you maintain it. This advantage compounds over time. In relationships, business, leadership, negotiation, and every difficult conversation you will ever face. Perhaps the most important truth of all is this: people who provoke you are often trying to control you. Not physically, emotionally. The moment they control your emotions, they influence your behavior. The moment you remain calm, that influence disappears. You do not need to defeat every insult. You do not need to answer every attack. You do not need to react to every provocation. Sometimes the most powerful response is composure. Because the person who remains calm under pressure possesses a strength that anger can never match. In the next chapter, we will explore the art of speaking with authority, how to communicate in a way that naturally commands attention, respect, and influence without ever raising your voice. Chapter 7. The art of speaking with authority. Many people believe authority comes from power. A job title, a position, money, status, experience. These things can certainly help, but they are not the true source of authority. Have you ever met someone with no impressive title who immediately commanded attention when they spoke? And have you ever met someone with a prestigious position whom nobody seemed to take seriously? The difference was not status. It was presence. Authority is not something people announce. It is something people project. And one of the most powerful ways to project authority is through communication. Not louder communication. Better communication. Why people listen to some voices and ignore others. Think about the people you naturally pay attention to. What makes them different? Often it is not intelligence, not appearance, not popularity. It is clarity, confidence, composure. Their words feel deliberate. Their ideas feel organized. Their presence feels grounded. People trust communicators who appear certain without appearing arrogant. And that trust creates influence. Authority begins with self-belief before other people believe in you. You must believe in yourself. This does not mean believing you are always right. It means trusting your ability to think, communicate, and handle disagreement. Many people undermine their authority before they even begin speaking. They constantly second-guess themselves. Apologize unnecessarily. Qualify every statement. Seek approval before expressing opinions. The result is uncertainty. And uncertainty weakens influence. Confidence begins internally long before it becomes visible externally. Stop asking for permission to speak. One of the most common habits that weakens authority is excessive permission-seeking language. For example, "This might be stupid, but I don't know if this makes sense. You probably know better than me, but..." These phrases immediately lower the perceived value of your message. Notice what happens. Before sharing an idea, you signal doubt. And people often respond accordingly. Authority grows when you express ideas clearly and directly. Not aggressively. Simply confidently. The power of clear communication. Confused communication creates confused impressions. Many people speak in circles. Add unnecessary details. Lose focus. Over-explain. The listener struggles to identify the main point. Authority requires clarity. Strong communicators understand exactly what they want to say, and they say it simply. The goal is not to sound intelligent. The goal is to be understood. People trust clarity. They distrust confusion. Why less is often more. When people feel insecure, they often talk too much. They add explanation after explanation. Justification after justification. Argument after argument. They hope more words will create more persuasion. But the opposite often occurs. The strongest communicators understand the value of brevity. A concise statement feels more confident than a lengthy defense. Consider these responses. No. Versus. Well, I would really like to help, but I'm not sure it's the best time because I have several things happening in. The first response communicates certainty. The second often communicates discomfort. Authority does not require excessive explanation. The hidden power of silence. Many people fear silence. They assume silence makes them appear uncertain. In reality, silence often communicates confidence. Confident people do not rush. They do not panic when conversations pause. They think before speaking. They allow their words to breathe. Silence creates emphasis. It draws attention. It communicates control. Some of the most influential speakers use pauses strategically because they understand that constant talking reduces impact. Slow down. Nervous people often speak quickly. They rush through ideas. Words blend together. The listener struggles to follow. Speaking slightly slower has several advantages. It improves clarity, improves comprehension, and creates an impression of confidence. When people rush, they often appear anxious. When people speak deliberately, they appear composed. Pace influences perception. Eliminate weak language. Certain words quietly weaken authority. Examples include maybe, kind of, sort of, I guess, probably. These words have legitimate uses. But when overused, they create uncertainty. Compare. I think this strategy might kind of work. With. I believe this strategy will work. The second statement sounds more confident. Authority often comes from removing unnecessary hesitation. The role of body language communication is not just verbal. Your body speaks too. Posture, eye contact, facial expressions, movement. All of these influence perception. People naturally associate authority with stability. Steady eye contact, relaxed posture, controlled movement. These signals communicate confidence. Fidgeting, avoidance, and nervous gestures often communicate uncertainty. Your body either reinforces your message or weakens it. Why emotional stability creates authority. Imagine two speakers. One becomes visibly frustrated when challenged. The other remains calm. Who appears more authoritative? Usually the second. Authority depends heavily on emotional stability. People trust those who remain composed under pressure. Because pressure reveals character. Anyone can appear confident when circumstances are easy. True confidence appears during difficulty. Stop defending every opinion. Many people weaken their authority by constantly defending themselves. They explain every decision, justify every preference, argue every criticism, seek validation for every belief. Authority grows when you stop feeling obligated to convince everyone. You can express an opinion without needing universal approval. You can make a decision without defending it endlessly. You can disagree without turning the disagreement into a debate. Confidence reduces the need for constant validation. Certainty without arrogance. There is an important distinction between confidence and arrogance. Confidence says, "I believe this is correct." Arrogance says, "I cannot be wrong." Confidence remains open to evidence. Arrogance rejects it. Confidence listens. Arrogance dismisses. Confidence attracts respect. Arrogance creates resistance. Authority requires certainty balanced by humility. The importance of conviction. People are naturally influenced by conviction, not blind conviction. Reasoned conviction. When someone speaks with clarity and certainty, listeners pay attention. This does not mean speaking loudly. It means speaking with belief. Belief communicates energy, and energy communicates confidence. People may disagree with conviction, but they rarely ignore it. Avoid emotional overreaction. Authority disappears quickly when emotions take control. Shouting, insults, sarcasm, defensiveness. These behaviors weaken influence. They suggest a loss of control. The most respected communicators remain measured, especially when challenged, especially when criticized, especially when others become emotional. Composure strengthens credibility. The authority of listening. Ironically, one of the strongest signs of authority is the willingness to listen. Weak communicators fear being overshadowed. Strong communicators are comfortable hearing other perspectives. They understand that listening does not diminish authority. It enhances it. Because understanding creates better responses. And better responses create greater influence. Speaking to be understood. Many people try to sound impressive. They use complicated language, technical terms, long explanations. The result is confusion. Authority is not about sounding sophisticated. It is about communicating clearly. The best communicators simplify complexity. They make difficult ideas understandable. That skill earns trust. And trust creates influence. The presence effect. Authority is often less about words and more about presence. Presence means being fully engaged, focused, attentive, grounded. People can sense when someone is distracted, uncertain, seeking approval. They can also sense when someone is comfortable in their own skin. That comfort creates a powerful impression. Because confidence is contagious. The quiet authority formula. If you want to speak with authority, remember these principles. Speak clearly. Speak calmly. Speak deliberately. Listen carefully. Avoid unnecessary explanations. Control your emotions. Maintain strong body language. Trust your own voice. None of these require aggression. None require dominance. None require raising your voice. Yet together, they create tremendous influence. The voice people remember. The most influential people are rarely the loudest people. They are the people whose words carry weight. The people who speak thoughtfully. The people who remain composed. The people who communicate with clarity and conviction. When they speak, others listen. Not because they demand attention. Because they have earned it. And that is the essence of authority. Perhaps the most important truth of all is this: authority is not created by volume. It is created by confidence. Not the confidence that shouts. The confidence that remains calm. The confidence that speaks clearly. The confidence that does not need constant approval. The confidence that trusts itself. Because people do not follow the loudest voice. They follow the voice that sounds certain, composed, and authentic. And that kind of authority can be developed by anyone willing to practice it. In the next chapter, we will explore how to handle difficult personalities, including narcissists, bullies, passive-aggressive people, and highly emotional individuals, without losing your composure or your influence. Chapter 8. How to handle difficult personalities. Not every argument is difficult because of the topic. Sometimes the topic is simple. The real challenge is the person. You can use excellent communication skills. Remain calm. Listen carefully. Ask thoughtful questions. And still find yourself struggling. Why? Because some people communicate in ways that make productive discussion extremely difficult. They interrupt, manipulate, deflect, attack, distort, escalate, refuse accountability, or simply enjoy conflict. In these situations, success requires a different approach. You cannot communicate with every personality the same way. The key is understanding what you are dealing with. Because once you recognize the pattern, you stop taking it personally. And when you stop taking it personally, you gain control. The biggest mistake people make. When dealing with difficult personalities, most people make one critical mistake. They assume the other person is operating under the same rules they are. They expect fairness, reason, honesty, mutual respect, good faith. Sometimes those expectations are correct. Sometimes they are not. The moment you recognize that someone is operating from a completely different mindset, your strategy must change. You stop expecting normal communication from abnormal behavior. The narcissist. One of the most challenging personalities to argue with is the narcissist. Not everyone with narcissistic traits has a clinical condition. But many people display narcissistic behaviors. They crave admiration, dislike criticism, need to feel superior, and often struggle to accept responsibility. Arguments with narcissistic individuals can feel exhausting, because the discussion is rarely about truth. It is often about protecting their self-image. Why logic often fails with narcissists. Many people assume facts will solve the problem. They gather evidence, present examples, offer proof. Yet nothing changes. The reason is simple. The argument is not about facts. It is about identity. When criticism threatens their self-image, the narcissistic person may deny reality, shift blame, rewrite history, attack your credibility, change the subject. Understanding this prevents frustration. You stop expecting logic alone to solve an emotional problem. How to respond to narcissists. The goal is not to defeat them. The goal is to protect your own clarity. Remain calm. Stick to facts. Avoid emotional escalation. Do not become trapped in endless justifications. Most importantly, do not expect validation from someone who struggles to acknowledge fault. Your peace becomes more important than their approval. The bully. Bullies use intimidation to gain control. Sometimes the intimidation is obvious. Sometimes it is subtle. But the goal remains the same: to make you uncomfortable, to make you back down, to make you doubt yourself. Bullies rely heavily on emotional pressure. They want reactions. Because reactions make people easier to control. Why bullies target reactions? Bullies often test boundaries. They look for emotional responses: fear, anger, uncertainty, defensiveness. These reactions provide information. They reveal vulnerabilities. And vulnerabilities create opportunities for control. The less reactive you become, the less effective bullying becomes. Standing firm without escalating. Many people assume the answer to bullying is aggression. Not necessarily. Aggression often creates a larger conflict. The most effective response is usually calm firmness, clear boundaries, steady communication, direct language. For example, "I disagree. That is not acceptable. Let's stay focused on the issue." Simple, calm, confident. No emotional drama required. The passive-aggressive person. Some people avoid direct conflict. Instead of expressing concerns openly, they communicate indirectly. Through sarcasm, subtle criticism, backhanded compliments, silent treatment, indirect resistance. This behavior can be frustrating because the real issue remains hidden. You sense the conflict, but nobody is addressing it directly. Why passive aggression is difficult? Passive aggression creates ambiguity. The person says one thing but communicates another. When confronted, they may deny everything. For example, "I was only joking. You're being too sensitive. I didn't mean it that way." The result is confusion, and confusion weakens communication. How to handle passive aggression? The solution is gentle directness. Bring the hidden issue into the open. Ask, "What do you mean by that? Is there something you'd like to discuss directly? Can we talk openly about the concern?" Direct questions often reduce ambiguity. And clarity is the enemy of passive aggression. The highly emotional person. Some people become overwhelmed by emotion during disagreements. Their feelings dominate the discussion. Tears, anger, frustration, fear, anxiety. The conversation becomes emotionally intense very quickly. This does not make them bad people, but it does require a thoughtful approach. Why emotional flooding happens? When emotions become intense, reasoning becomes more difficult. The brain shifts into survival mode. People focus on feelings rather than solutions. During these moments, logic alone is rarely effective. The emotional state must be addressed first. Only then can productive communication resume. Responding to emotional intensity. The worst thing you can do is dismiss emotions. Statements like, "Calm down," "You're overreacting," "You're being irrational," usually make things worse. Instead, acknowledge the emotion, not necessarily the conclusion, the emotion. For example, "I can see this is really important to you. I understand you're frustrated." This reduces resistance. People often become calmer when they feel understood. The chronic complainer. Some people focus almost exclusively on problems. Every solution has flaws. Every opportunity has risks. Every discussion becomes negative. These individuals can drain enormous amounts of energy, not because their concerns are invalid, because they rarely move toward solutions. Redirecting the conversation. Instead of becoming trapped in endless complaints, ask, "What solution would you suggest? What outcome are you hoping for? What would improve the situation?" These questions shift attention from problems to possibilities. Not everyone will engage, but those who are willing often become more constructive. The know-it-all. The know-it-all believes they already have the answer to everything. They interrupt, correct others constantly, dismiss alternative perspectives, and often struggle with humility. Arguing directly with them usually creates resistance, because their identity depends heavily on appearing knowledgeable. Managing the know-it-all. Instead of confrontation, use curiosity. Ask questions. Invite explanation. Explore details. This approach often reveals weaknesses naturally, without triggering unnecessary conflict. People are generally more receptive to discovering limitations themselves than having limitations pointed out aggressively. The professional victim. Some individuals consistently position themselves as victims. Nothing is their responsibility. Every problem is someone else's fault. Every setback has an external cause. Accountability becomes extremely difficult, because responsibility threatens the narrative. Avoid becoming the rescuer. Many people get trapped trying to save chronic victims. They offer solutions repeatedly, advice repeatedly, support repeatedly, only to watch the pattern continue. At some point, responsibility must remain with the individual. You can support people. You cannot live their lives for them. The master principle. Although difficult personalities vary greatly, one principle applies to all of them. Do not allow their behavior to dictate yours. This is where many people fail. They mirror the dysfunction. They respond to aggression with aggression, manipulation with manipulation, drama with drama. And suddenly both people are behaving poorly. The strongest communicators refuse this trap. They maintain their standards regardless of the other person's behavior. Protecting your energy. Not every argument deserves your participation. Not every criticism deserves a response. Not every difficult person deserves unlimited access to your attention. This is one of the most important lessons in communication. Influence requires energy. And energy is limited. Spend it wisely. The ultimate skill. The ultimate communication skill is not persuading easy people. Easy people require little skill. The ultimate skill is maintaining your composure around difficult people. Remaining respectful when others are rude. Remaining clear when others are confusing. Remaining calm when others are emotional. Remaining confident when others try to undermine you. This is where true influence appears. Not in perfect conditions, but in difficult ones. Perhaps the most important truth of all is this: difficult people reveal the strength of your communication skills. Anyone can stay calm around reasonable people. Anyone can be patient when conversations are easy. The real test comes when emotions rise, manipulation appears, and conflict becomes uncomfortable. Because influence is not measured by how you handle easy conversations. It is measured by how you handle difficult ones. And the person who maintains composure in the face of difficult personalities possesses a level of strength that few people ever develop. In the next chapter, we will explore how to win disagreements without humiliating people, one of the most important secrets to building long-term influence, trust, and respect. Chapter 9. Winning without humiliating people. Many people think winning an argument means proving someone wrong, destroying their logic, exposing their mistakes, embarrassing them publicly, leaving them with no response. In short, they see arguments as competitions. And in competitions, there must be winners and losers. But the most influential communicators understand a deeper truth. Winning an argument and winning a person are not the same thing. You can defeat someone's position and lose their respect. You can prove your point and damage the relationship. You can win the battle and lose the war. The goal of communication should not always be victory. Sometimes the goal is influence. And influence requires something many people overlook: dignity. The human need for dignity. Every person wants to feel respected, valued, competent, worthwhile. This need exists regardless of intelligence, status, or background. When people feel their dignity is threatened, they become defensive. Not because they necessarily disagree. Because they feel attacked. Humiliation creates resistance. Respect creates openness. This is one of the most important principles in persuasion. People are far more willing to change when they do not feel embarrassed. Why public embarrassment backfires. Imagine correcting someone in front of a group. Pointing out their mistake. Exposing their error. Making them look foolish. Even if your correction is accurate, what happens next? Most people do not respond with gratitude. They respond with defensiveness. Because public embarrassment threatens social standing. And protecting social standing is a powerful human instinct. The person becomes focused on saving face rather than learning. The opportunity for influence disappears. The difference between correction and humiliation: correction is focused on truth. Humiliation is focused on superiority. Correction says, "Let's get this right." Humiliation says, "Let me show everyone how wrong you are." The difference may seem subtle, but the impact is enormous. One encourages growth. The other encourages resentment. Influential communicators focus on correction, not humiliation. Why ego loves victory? The ego enjoys winning. It enjoys being right. It enjoys recognition, validation, superiority. There is nothing unusual about this. Almost everyone experiences it. The problem occurs when ego becomes the primary goal. When proving yourself right becomes more important than solving the problem. More important than preserving trust. More important than achieving the best outcome. At that point, communication becomes self-serving. And self-serving communication rarely creates lasting influence. Helping people save face. One of the most valuable skills in communication is helping people save face. Saving face means allowing someone to maintain dignity while changing position. Imagine someone realizes they are mistaken. If changing their mind requires public humiliation, they may resist. If changing their mind allows them to preserve self-respect, they become more flexible. This is why effective leaders often provide graceful exits. They create opportunities for adjustment without embarrassment. And those opportunities make change easier. The art of gentle correction. There are many ways to correct someone. Some create conflict. Others create understanding. Compare these approaches. Harsh correction. You're completely wrong. Gentle correction. I see it a little differently. The second approach still communicates disagreement. But it reduces resistance. Because it focuses on the idea rather than attacking the person. This small difference can transform a conversation. Separate the person from the position. One of the most common mistakes in arguments is confusing people with their opinions. A person is not their argument. A person is not their mistake. A person is not their bad idea. When you attack the individual, resistance increases. When you focus on the position, discussion becomes easier. For example, instead of, "You're ignorant," try, "I think there may be another way to look at this." One attacks identity. The other addresses the idea. The distinction matters. Why respect increases influence. Many people assume respect weakens persuasion. They believe strong influence requires dominance. But the opposite is often true. Respect lowers defenses. Respect builds trust. Respect encourages openness. People are far more likely to consider your perspective when they feel valued. This does not mean avoiding disagreement. It means disagreeing with dignity. The long-term perspective. Imagine two communicators. The first wins arguments through humiliation. The second wins arguments through respect. Who will have stronger relationships 5 years from now? Who will have greater influence? Who will attract more trust? The answer is usually obvious. Because relationships are built over time. And every interaction contributes to a reputation. People remember how you made them feel. Long after they forget the details of the argument. Influence is not about defeat. Many people view persuasion as conquest. Defeat the opposition. Overpower resistance. Dominate the discussion. But influence works differently. Influence creates movement, understanding, growth, cooperation. The goal is not to crush another perspective. The goal is to create enough trust that ideas can be considered honestly. This requires respect. Why mockery is weak? Persuasion. Mockery often feels satisfying, especially when someone appears unreasonable. But satisfaction and effectiveness are not the same thing. Mockery rarely changes minds. Instead, it creates defensiveness, anger, resentment. The person feels attacked rather than persuaded. Strong communicators resist the temptation to ridicule. Because their goal is influence, not entertainment. The strength of humility. Humility is one of the most underrated persuasion tools. Humility does not mean weakness. It means recognizing that you may not know everything. That you may occasionally be mistaken. That other people may have valuable insights. Humility creates credibility. Arrogance weakens it. People trust those who are willing to acknowledge uncertainty. Because honesty inspires confidence. Admitting your own mistakes. One of the fastest ways to reduce defensiveness is admitting your own mistakes. When people see that you are willing to acknowledge error, they feel less threatened. The conversation becomes safer, more collaborative, less competitive. Admitting mistakes demonstrates confidence. Insecure people hide errors. Confident people learn from them. Creating allies instead of enemies. Every argument creates a choice. You can create an enemy, or you can create an ally. Humiliation creates enemies. Respect creates allies. Even when disagreement remains, even when consensus is impossible, the way you communicate determines which outcome becomes more likely. And allies are far more valuable than victories. The leadership principle. Great leaders understand this intuitively. They correct without shaming, challenge without humiliating, guide without belittling. They understand that people perform best when dignity remains intact. And the same principle applies to arguments. When people feel respected, they become more receptive. When they feel humiliated, they become more resistant. Winning the relationship. There are times when preserving the relationship matters more than proving a point. This requires maturity, restraint, perspective. Because the ego always wants victory. But wisdom asks a different question. What outcome matters most? Sometimes the answer is influence. Sometimes the answer is trust. Sometimes the answer is connection. And those outcomes often require more than being right. They require being respectful. The highest form of persuasion. The highest form of persuasion is not forcing someone to admit defeat. It is helping someone arrive at a better conclusion while preserving their dignity. That approach creates lasting change. Because change embraced voluntarily is stronger than change forced through embarrassment. People remember those who treated them with respect, especially during disagreement. Perhaps the most important truth of all is this: anyone can make another person feel small. Anyone can embarrass, mock, or humiliate. Those behaviors require very little skill. True influence requires something harder: respect, patience, restraint, the ability to correct without attacking, the ability to disagree without degrading, the ability to win without humiliating. Because the strongest communicators do not simply win arguments. They earn trust. And trust is far more valuable than victory. In the final chapter, we will explore the ultimate communication secret, knowing when not to argue at all, and why walking away is sometimes the most powerful move you can make. Chapter 10. The Ultimate Secret. Knowing when not to argue. Most people spend their lives learning how to argue. How to defend themselves. How to persuade. How to debate. How to prove a point. Very few people learn something equally important: when not to argue. This may be the most valuable communication skill of all. Because no matter how intelligent you are, no matter how persuasive you become, no matter how skilled you are at handling conflict, some arguments are simply not worth having. The highest level of communication is not winning every argument. It is knowing which arguments deserve your energy. The hidden cost of every argument. Every argument has a price: time, energy, attention, emotional investment, mental focus. These resources are limited. Every minute spent in a pointless conflict is a minute unavailable for something more valuable. Yet many people argue as though their resources are infinite. They debate strangers online, defend themselves endlessly, fight every criticism, respond to every provocation, correct every misunderstanding, and gradually, they exhaust themselves. Not because they lack intelligence, because they lack selectivity. Not every invitation must be accepted. Imagine receiving an invitation to a fight. Do you have to attend? Of course not. Yet emotionally, many people behave as if they do. Someone insults them. They respond. Someone criticizes them. They respond. Someone provokes them. They respond. Someone misunderstands them. They respond. The pattern becomes automatic. But an invitation is not an obligation. You are allowed to decline. And often, declining is the wisest choice. The difference between productive and pointless conflict: some disagreements are valuable. They improve understanding, strengthen relationships, solve problems, create growth. Others accomplish nothing. They repeat endlessly, generate hostility, waste energy, and leave everyone frustrated. The challenge is learning to recognize the difference before investing your time, not after. The 3 questions. Before entering any argument, ask yourself 3 questions. 1. Is this conversation likely to produce a positive outcome? 2. Is this issue important enough to justify the energy required? 3. Is the other person willing to engage in good faith? If the answer to all 3 questions is no, the argument may not be worth having. Simple. Yet many people ignore these questions entirely. You cannot change everyone. One of the most liberating truths in communication is this: you cannot change everyone. No matter how logical your argument, no matter how compelling your evidence, no matter how sincere your intentions, some people are not ready to change. Some people do not want to change. Some people are committed to misunderstanding. Accepting this reality prevents enormous frustration, because influence requires willingness, and willingness cannot be forced. The need to be understood. Many arguments are driven by a deep desire to be understood. People want others to see their perspective, recognize their intentions, acknowledge their truth. This desire is completely human, but it can also become a trap, because sometimes the pursuit of understanding becomes endless. You explain, clarify, defend, re-explain, clarify again, defend again, yet nothing changes. At some point, you must recognize that not everyone will understand you, and that is okay. Why silence is often stronger than explanation. Many people overestimate the power of explanation. They believe that if they can just find the right words, everything will become clear. Sometimes that is true. Often it is not. Some misunderstandings persist regardless of explanation. Some critics have already made up their minds. Some people are committed to their interpretation. In these situations, additional explanation may not help. Silence becomes more powerful. Not because you have nothing to say, because you have nothing left to prove. The confidence to walk away. Walking away requires confidence. Insecure people often feel compelled to stay, to defend, to justify, to convince. Confident people recognize that not every battle deserves their attention. They understand that disengagement is not surrender. It is selection. They are choosing where to invest their energy, and where not to. Protecting your peace. Peace is valuable. Far more valuable than most people realize. Yet many people sacrifice peace in pursuit of victory. They win the argument, lose their calm. Win the debate, lose their happiness. Win the point, lose the relationship. A wiser approach asks, what am I giving up in order to win this? Sometimes the answer is too much. The wisdom of detachment. Detachment does not mean apathy. It means freedom. Freedom from needing everyone to agree. Freedom from needing constant validation. Freedom from needing every misunderstanding corrected. Freedom from needing every critic convinced. This freedom creates enormous emotional strength, because your well-being no longer depends on other people's opinions. The online argument trap. Modern technology has created endless opportunities for argument. Social media, comment sections, forums, messages, opinions everywhere, disagreements everywhere. Many people spend hours defending themselves to strangers they will never meet. Hours that could have been spent learning, creating, building, living. The question is not whether you can win the argument. The question is whether winning matters. Often it does not. Choose your battles carefully. Every successful strategist understands the importance of selection. They do not fight every battle. They choose carefully. Communication works the same way. Argue when something important is at stake. Argue when understanding is possible. Argue when the relationship matters. Argue when growth is achievable. But do not argue simply because someone challenges you. That path leads to exhaustion. Energy is a valuable resource. Imagine your energy as a bank account. Every conflict makes a withdrawal. Some withdrawals are worthwhile, others are not. The problem is that many people spend energy carelessly. A criticism here. An online debate there. A pointless disagreement somewhere else. Small withdrawals accumulate. Eventually, the account becomes depleted. Wise communicators protect their energy because they understand its value. Let results speak. One of the strongest forms of communication is action. Many people argue endlessly about who they are, what they believe, what they can accomplish. Others simply demonstrate it. Results often communicate more effectively than explanations. Success speaks. Consistency speaks. Character speaks. Integrity speaks. You do not always need words. Sometimes your life becomes the argument. Maturity changes the game. As people mature, something interesting often happens. They become less interested in winning every disagreement, more interested in protecting their peace. Less interested in proving themselves, more interested in understanding themselves. Less interested in being right, more interested in being effective. This shift changes everything, because effectiveness often requires restraint. The highest form of power. Many people define power as the ability to dominate, to control, to defeat. But there is a higher form of power. The power to remain calm. The power to choose your response. The power to walk away. The power to refuse unnecessary conflict. The power to protect your attention. The power to preserve your peace. This kind of power cannot be taken from you, because it comes from within. The final lesson. Throughout this book, we have explored persuasion, listening, questions, authority, emotional control, difficult personalities, respect, influence. All of these skills matter, but they ultimately lead to one final insight. You do not need to win every argument. You do not need to convince everyone. You do not need universal approval. You do not need the last word. What you need is wisdom. The wisdom to know when engagement is valuable, and the wisdom to know when it is not. Because communication is not about proving your worth. Your worth exists independently of anyone's agreement. Conclusion. The person who wins every argument is not necessarily successful. The person who protects their peace, maintains their dignity, and communicates with wisdom often is. Real influence comes from emotional control, deep listening, thoughtful questions, respectful disagreement, calm confidence, strategic silence, wise restraint. These qualities separate reactive people from influential people. And perhaps the greatest lesson of all is this: you do not have to attend every argument you are invited to. You do not have to prove yourself to everyone. You do not have to fight every battle. Sometimes the strongest response is silence. Sometimes the wisest move is walking away. And sometimes true victory is preserving your peace while others continue fighting. Because in the end, the goal is not to win arguments. The goal is to live wisely. And wisdom always knows the difference. End of book. How to win any argument without raising your voice.